7 out of 10 bottles on the auto parts shelf cannot dissolve a single milligram of baked-on carbon inside a modern fuel injector. I've pulled apart enough clogged fuel rails in 20+ years to fill a dumpster, and almost everyone had a receipt for some miracle additive in the glove box. The damage runs from fouled plugs to seized pistons. By the end of this, you'll know exactly which fluids destroy engines and the 5 that actually earn their shelf space. Number 7. Seafoam. Last Tuesday, a guy rolled into the shop with a 2019 RAV4. Rough idle, check engine light, fuel trims way off. First thing I asked was whether he'd dumped anything into the tank recently. He pulled out an empty can of Seafoam, said he'd used it every oil change for years, trusted it completely, and I understand why. Seafoam has been around since the 1940s. Your grandfather probably swore by it. Entire forums are built around the idea that this one can fixes everything from rough idle to carbon deposits, but here's what those forums never mention. Seafoam's active ingredients are pale oil, naphtha, and isopropyl alcohol. Not one of those compounds can touch polyethyramine, which is the only detergent chemistry with peer-reviewed evidence of dissolving hardened carbon deposits off modern fuel injector tips. Seafoam can shift light surface gunk in older carbureted engines and 2-stroke applications, and it works fine as a fuel stabilizer for a lawnmower sitting in the shed over winter. But pour it into a modern 4-stroke engine, expecting it to clean baked-on carbon at 600 degrees, and all you're doing is knocking loose debris that clogs your fuel filter, fouls your spark plugs, and triggers the exact check engine light you were trying to prevent. That RAV4 needed new plugs and a fuel filter, $60 in parts, $200 in labor, and the carbon deposits on the injectors hadn't budged. They were still there, still restricting flow, still causing the rough idle he came in complaining about. Here's the uncomfortable truth about Seafoam. It's not a bad product, it's a misapplied product. And the misapplication is costing people real money, because while they pour can after can into the tank thinking they're doing maintenance, the actual problem underneath keeps getting worse. Keep that word in mind. Polyethyramine. It's going to come up again and again throughout this list. And when it finally does, everything about why these products fail clicks into place. But wasted money on Seafoam is nothing compared to what the next fluid does to your oxygen sensors over time. Number 6. Octane boosters. Walk into any auto parts store and you'll see them right at eye level. Bold labels, race car graphics, promises of unleashed horsepower. A customer showed me 3 empty bottles last month and asked why his Civic still felt sluggish after dumping them in every fill-up for 6 months straight. Here's the reality no label will ever print. A standard, retail octane booster raises your fuel's rating by 1, maybe 2 points on a good day. Your engine's knock sensor already adjusts ignition timing automatically to prevent detonation on every single combustion cycle. If your car is tuned for 87 octane, pouring in a booster that nudges it to 88 or 89 does exactly nothing the computer isn't already handling on its own. You're spending $8 to $15 a bottle to change a number your engine doesn't even need changed. That's the waste side. Now here's the damage side. The cheaper formulations use aggressive petroleum solvents that gradually coat oxygen sensor elements and eat away at catalytic converter substrates with repeated use. One bottle won't kill anything outright, but the driver dumping these in every single fill-up is slowly poisoning the most expensive emissions components on the entire vehicle. A catalytic converter replacement runs $1,200 to $2,500 on most cars. An oxygen sensor smart set runs another $200 to $300 per bank. That's the real price tag hiding behind the promise of horsepower that was never actually missing. If you run a high compression race motor or tow heavy loads at altitude where air density drops, legitimate octane support makes sense. For everyone else on a daily driver burning regular, boosters are a liquid placebo with a slow, compounding side effect nobody reads about on the back of the bottle. The next one isn't even something you buy at a parts store. It's sitting under your bathroom sink. Number 5. Rubbing alcohol poured straight into the gas tank. A buddy of mine called me on a Saturday morning, panicking. He'd watched a video online that said, pour a cup of isopropyl alcohol into your tank to absorb moisture and prevent fuel line freeze. He grabbed the 70% bottle from under the bathroom sink and dumped in the whole thing. Within a week, his fuel pressure dropped, the engine started surging at idle, and his check engine light threw lean condition codes on both banks. Here's what happened inside that fuel system. Bathroom-grade isopropyl in uncontrolled amounts dries out every rubber seal, O-ring, and plastic fitting it contacts. Modern fuel lines, injector seals, and pump diaphragms are engineered for gasoline and ethanol blends at specific concentrations, not for a concentrated alcohol bath. The rubber cracks, fuel pressure drops, and you're looking at a fuel pump replacement that runs $400 to $800 plus injector service stacked on top. And isopropyl isn't remotely strong enough to dissolve heavy carbon deposits either. What it actually does is knock chunks loose, and those chunks migrate downstream and jam injector pintle valves shut. Layer on lean burn conditions from alcohol's extra oxygen content, and you get elevated combustion temperatures that accelerate piston ring wear and invite detonation. My buddy's total bill ended up around $1,100, counting the pump, 2 injectors, and labor, all from a $3 drugstore bottle. There is a correct way to use isopropyl alcohol in a fuel system, and we'll get to that in the second half of this list. But the bathroom cabinet version dumped in random amounts is a guaranteed damage path every time. If this is already saving you from a mistake you were about to make, hit subscribe so you catch the 5 fluids that actually work. Number 4, Marvel Mystery Oil. I'll say something unpopular. Marvel Mystery Oil does not clean carbon deposits. It lubricates. That's what it was formulated to do, and it does that part acceptably well. Pour it in your fuel tank, and it'll coat the fuel pump and upper cylinder walls with a light protective film that can slow future deposit formation on an engine that's already relatively clean inside. But once carbon has baked onto injector tips at 600 degrees over 40 or 50,000 miles, a lubricant cannot break that chemical bond. There's no PEA in the Marvel formula, no aggressive detergent chemistry of any kind. So the driver who pours it in at every fill-up expecting restored power and better mileage is spending money on prevention while calling it a cure. The rough idle stays, the fuel economy keeps dropping, the actual deposits sit untouched, still choking the injectors, still altering spray patterns, still robbing efficiency one combustion cycle at a time. Marvel has legitimate preventive value on a newer engine with minimal existing buildup, used early and used consistently. The problem is how people actually use it in the real world as a rescue product for engines with significant carbon accumulation. False confidence is its own kind of damage. Every month you trust the wrong product is another month the right treatment gets delayed. And the engine never stops building carbon while you wait. I've had customers come in with 80,000 miles of Marvel treatments behind them and injectors so caked with deposits that no amount of chemical cleaning could fully restore the original flow pattern. At that point, you're buying new injectors, $300 to $600 per set, depending on the application, all because a lubricant was being asked to do a detergent's job. That right treatment costs about $8, and it's coming. But the next entry turns a $3 purchase into a $2,000 surprise. Number 3, cheap fuel injector cleaners. Pull any $3 injector cleaner off the bottom shelf and flip it over. Read the ingredients. You'll find kerosene, alcohol, maybe some petroleum distillates. No PEA listed anywhere. These bottles make promises like restores lost power and boosts fuel economy by 25%. and none of it survives scrutiny once you understand what's actually inside. Without polyethyramine, these formulations cannot dissolve hardened carbon. That's not my opinion, that's chemistry. What they can do is loosen soft surface deposits just enough to break them free, and those fragments travel downstream into the fuel filter, the injector screens, and eventually lodge in the catalytic converter substrate. Kerosene in the mix actually lowers your fuel's effective octane rating, which introduces engine knock on top of the clogging problem. That's metal hammering metal inside the combustion chambers, and it grinds down rod bearings and piston rings every time it happens. I had a customer with a 2020 Tucson GDI engine who used a bargain cleaner every 3,000 miles religiously for 2 straight years. By 60,000 miles, the catalytic converter efficiency code was permanent, and 2 injectors had restricted flow patterns on the scope. The converter alone ran $1,900, $3 a bottle, 24 bottles over 2 years, $72 invested to cause $1,900 in confirmed damage. And that customer thought he was being responsible. He thought the regular treatments were keeping the vehicle engine clean. He was doing exactly what the label told him to do. That's the part that gets me. GDI engines are especially vulnerable because their high-pressure fuel systems have zero tolerance for debris migration through the rail. Port injection setups are more forgiving, but catalytic converter contamination applies universally to every modern vehicle on the road, regardless of injection type. If the bottle costs $3 and the label makes promises that sound too good, that's because they are. This is where cheap stops being a bargain and starts compounding into a liability. Debris in your fuel system is still fixable with the right service. The next entry can destroy an engine in under 60 seconds flat. Number 2, diesel fuel in a gasoline engine. I've seen this come through my bay 3 times in the last year alone, and every single case followed the same pattern. The diesel nozzle at most US stations is slightly larger than a gasoline filler neck, but worn filler, doors, aftermarket gas caps, and one distracted moment at a busy pump are all it takes to get diesel into a gas tank. Diesel cannot ignite properly under spark ignition compression ratios. The engine misfires, knocks, and stalls almost immediately, but the real destruction begins when the panicked driver keeps cranking the starter, because every crank cycle pushes diesel deeper into the fuel rail and across every injector tip in the system. Here's the decision tree I walk customers through. If you realize the mistake before turning the key, it's a tank drain and fuel line purge. $300, maybe $400. Annoying, but manageable. If you crank the engine and it never actually fires, you're looking at a full fuel system flush, new spark plugs, possibly new injector screens. $1,000 or more. But if the engine actually runs on diesel for even 2 or 3 minutes, the damage escalates fast. Diesel's heavier hydrocarbons foul spark plugs with wet carbon. Injector tips get coated with residue that permanently alters spray geometry, meaning even after professional cleaning, spray pattern never returns to factory spec. A high-pressure fuel pump, precision machined for gasoline-specific lubricity, gets scored by diesel's thicker film characteristics. At that point, you're replacing injectors, the pump, and very likely the catalytic converter. I've written estimates past $5,000 for misfueling damage that lasted less than 3 minutes of engine operation. The customer who caught it before cranking spent $300 and drove home the same afternoon. The customer who ran the engine for 2 minutes was without a car for 3 weeks while we sourced parts. Same mistake, different outcomes. Separated entirely by whether someone kept turning that key. European manufacturers install misfueling prevention devices as standard. American vehicles almost never have them. One wrong nozzle, one moment of inattention, and the repair bill scales with every single second that engine keeps running. And yet, diesel misfueling is still a freak accident. The number 1 fluid on this list is already inside your tank right now, and no sensor on your car will ever warn you. Number 1, water. Every gas tank accumulates water. It enters through condensation when drivers habitually run below a quarter tank. leaving airspace where moisture collects on cool metal walls overnight. It enters through ethanol phase separation in fuel that sits unused too long. And occasionally it comes from contaminated station deliveries after heavy rain floods underground storage tanks. Small amounts cause injector tip corrosion, fuel line surface rust, and intermittent misfires under load that come and go just enough to convince you the car is fine. In freezing climates, water in the fuel line forms ice blockages that perfectly mimic a dead fuel pump. I've watched mechanics replace a $400 pump before anyone thought to check for ice crystals sitting in the line. But here's the catastrophic scenario. When enough water reaches the combustion chamber, the piston slams upward on the compression stroke and hits something it physically cannot compress. Water does not compress. The connecting rod bends. The cylinder head cracks. That is hydrolock, and it happens in one violent compression stroke. One moment the engine is running, the next it's scrap metal. There is no warning light for water contamination, no OBD code, no sensor anywhere in the system designed to detect it. Symptoms build invisibly over weeks. Hard, cold starts, rough idle at stoplights, slight sputtering under acceleration. By the time it becomes obvious, corrosion has already spread through the injectors, fuel rail, and pump internals. Prevention costs $0. Stop running your tank below a quarter. Less airspace means less condensation. In humid climates, or if the car sits for days between drives, the risk compounds fast. And if you've been running on fumes for years, there's a good chance water has already been accumulating at the bottom of your tank without a single symptom to show for it. Water is the silent killer because you never bought it, never poured it in, and never knew it was there. Now, 5 fluids that actually earn their place in your fuel system. Number 5, fuel stabilizer. Anything with an engine that sits more than 30 days between uses needs fuel stabilizer. Not optional, non-negotiable. Gasoline begins oxidizing and forming varnish within weeks of sitting still. Ethanol-blended fuel degrades even faster, with phase separation starting in as little as 30 to 60 days. That varnish clogs carburetors, coats injector tips, and gums fuel lines shut. An $8 bottle of Stabil or Startron added to fresh fuel before storage keeps chemistry stable for up to 12 months. The critical detail is timing. Add it before storage to fresh fuel, not after degradation has already started. Daily drivers burning fresh fuel every week don't need it. But if a boat, generator, classic car, or seasonal vehicle sits in your garage between uses, skipping stabilizer is an open invitation for an $800 carburetor rebuild or injector cleaning that a single dose would have prevented. I've lost count of how many spring service calls I get where a generator or riding mower won't start, and the diagnosis is always the same. Stale fuel, no stabilizer, varnished carburetor. Every single time. There's a fluid from part 1 that actually belongs in your fuel system too, just used the right way. Number 4, fuel-grade isopropyl alcohol, the yellow bottle of heat. Remember the rubbing alcohol warning from earlier? Here's where it flips. Fuel-grade isopropyl, sold as heat yellow, is formulated specifically for fuel system use. Added in the correct small dose, it bonds with trapped water molecules at the tank bottom and carries them harmlessly through combustion instead of letting them pool where they cause corrosion and icing. This directly solves the water problem from our number 1 entry, 1 bottle per tank in cold weather or before long-term storage. That's the correct dose. The difference between this and dumping bathroom alcohol by the cupful is purity, concentration, and controlled dosing. Yellow bottle heat is isopropyl-based and safe for modern fuel-injected engines. The red bottle is methanol-based and harder on rubber components, so stick with yellow. In warm climates with daily driving on ethanol-blended fuel, you may never need it. But in cold states, humid regions, or any vehicle that sits between drives, one yellow bottle seasonally is the cheapest insurance against everything water does inside a fuel system. $2 to prevent $400 in fuel pump damage. That's the kind of math I wish more drivers would run before they skip the small stuff. Now, the one additive every segment in part 1 was building toward. Number 3, PEA-based fuel system cleaners. This is the payoff. Every time I said a product couldn't clean carbon because it lacked polyethyramine, this is what I was pointing to. PEA is the only fuel additive chemistry with consistent, peer-reviewed evidence of dissolving carbon deposits from intake valves, injector tips, and combustion chambers without leaving its own residue behind. Chevron Techron Concentrate Plus. Gum out regain high mileage. Read the label. If it lists polyethyramine or PEA as the active ingredient, it works. If the label says vague fuel system detergent without naming the chemistry, put it back on the shelf. Use a PEA cleaner every 5,000 to 7,000 miles as ongoing maintenance. GDI engines benefit the most because they lack port injection's natural fuel wash over intake valves. BMW and GM have both publicly endorsed specific PEA-based products for their direct injection lineups. But understand what this is. Consistent maintenance support, not a single dose miracle. 80,000 miles of untreated buildup won't vanish in one tank. Regular use over time is what keeps injectors clean and combustion efficient for the life of the engine. I run Techron through every car I personally own, every other oil change. No exceptions. This is the additive mechanics buy with their own money, not the flashy bottles with racing stripes, not the ones endorsed by influencers. The plain-looking bottle with PEA on the ingredient list. That tells you everything about what actually works. Number 2, ethanol-free gasoline where it actually matters. This entry demands nuance because most of what you hear about ethanol-free gas is either oversimplified or wrong. Your 2024 Camry's ECU is calibrated specifically for E10, and switching to ethanol-free premium gives it no measurable performance or protection advantage. Save your money. But for anything that stores fuel for extended periods, boats, generators, classic cars with original rubber, fuel components, ethanol-free gasoline eliminates the phase separation, moisture absorption, and rubber degradation that E10 creates in systems sitting idle for weeks or months at a time. If your weekend car runs original 1970s fuel lines and a carburetor, ethanol is actively eating those components from the inside out. If your backup generator sits untouched from April to November, E10 will turn to varnish long before you need it. That's where ethanol-free justifies the premium, and where it genuinely prevents hundreds in avoidable repairs. Check puregas.org for stations near you. Use it where it matters. Skip it everywhere else. The honest answer is narrow, and anyone pushing ethanol-free as universally superior is either misinformed or selling premium fuel. The number 1 fluid on this list is something you already buy every single week. You're just buying it at the wrong station. Number 1, top-tier gasoline. Top-tier is a fuel quality certification requiring significantly higher detergent additive concentrations than the bare EPA minimum. This is not marketing. AAA tested it independently in 2016 and documented measurably less carbon deposit formation after just 10,000 miles compared to non-top-tier fuel. Shell, Chevron, Costco, and Quick Trip all qualify. The cheapest no-name station in town almost certainly does not. The price difference is pennies per gallon. The protection difference is measurable deposit accumulation on intake valves and injector tips compounding quietly over years of daily driving. GDI engines benefit the most because there's no port injection fuel wash cleaning the valves behind the scenes. This is the lowest effort recommendation on the entire list. No product to buy, no additive to dose, no interval to track. Just choose a top-tier station next time you fill up. You're already stopping for gas. You might as well stop somewhere that protects the engine while it fills the tank. Every mechanic I know fills up at a top-tier station, not because someone told us to, because we've seen what happens inside the engines that don't. Full qualifying brand list is at toptiergas.com. If this changed how you think about what goes into your tank, there's a video on screen right now that digs even deeper into engine protection. Click it, and I'll see you there.